Good evening and welcome to the November 20th, 2023 Finance and Capital Management Committee meeting of the Akron Public Schools. Thank you for those who may be watching us. And so we'll go ahead and jump right on in to our agenda. Item 1.01 is our previous meeting summary. And so we have not met in the last month because of the hard work of our treasurer here on our Standard & Poor's credit rating that we're going to be hearing more about. So this is from September. Are there any comments, questions, corrections to that previous meeting summary?
None that I saw, no.
Okay. All righty. And so with no additions, corrections, or comments to that, we'll proceed on to the next item on the agenda, 2.01, review of potential levy impacts. Dr. Thompson.
Well, thank you, Finance Committee, for meeting tonight. And also, of course, we're embarking upon Thanksgiving, so I wish each of you a happy holiday, and to all the people that are out in the community that might be listening, I hope your holidays go very well. And it goes so fast, doesn't it? Can you believe it's Thanksgiving? I mean, feels like we just started the school year. But what I'd like to cover are some of those levy impacts, and there is some not so good news to share in terms of our in terms of the impact on our 5-year forecast. House Bill 187 is just something to watch. I just want to briefly bring it to your attention. The monthly financial reports are uploaded for you. I wanted to just briefly hit some high-level levy strategy and begin to have those conversations about putting that together and moving forward. And then a review, which you've already seen before, but a review of that S&P global ratings. And more than anything, it's just another opportunity for the community to see the work that's been done over the course of many years. But so some of the levy impacts, you've seen all these before. The base assumptions include that recurring ESSER expenses back into general fund. To put that, what does that mean? That means that we have about $7.5 million that were primarily positions or things paid for with ESSER dollars that no longer exist. And so that impacts the general fund now, goes back into the general fund. It's not helpful, in terms of a financial carryover. It includes the reductions the past administration had worked on, includes reductions based on closing Firestone Park and our ELPs in 25. It is updated regarding our most recent property values, and that's where House Bill 187 plays a role that I'll talk about a little bit later. It assumes that we're educating about 19,200 kids. Right now we're educating a little more than that, so that would be a movement in our favor. It includes that $30 million of supplanting of those ESSER dollars, so that does help the general fund. That's an infusion in the general fund. And they're repeated throughout all the different scenarios we looked at, but we're only going to focus on the one we're actually doing. It adds the debt payments based on our debt schedule from our COPS deal, and it came out to be about $100,000 less per year than we had anticipated. There was a lot of activity on our bond, purchasing our bonds, and because there was more buyers essentially than bonds, we were able to ratchet the interest rate down and still got enough buyers to fulfill our order, which means we just got a better deal. So we just hit the market at the right day at the right time. And then, of course, it adds the $15 million in cuts, and I think that's really important. Now, one of the things I want to make sure that this committee and the board understands, whenever we do anything that is additional, anything additional, whether it's, we fully believe in it or not. I'm not passing judgment on whether we should or shouldn't. But what I want you to understand is when we add a position, add a something, that adds onto that $15 million. So you need to keep that in mind. And at this point, if all the numbers were to hold true, and they do not, $15 million wouldn't end up keeping us in the black as things stand right now in that fifth year of the forecast because of the additional expenditures that we've added. So that's important to note.
So we'd effectively need more cuts, is what you're really saying?
Yeah, so that number is probably 15.6 or more.
Okay. And that's for fiscal year 25.
That's correct. And those cuts have to be, it's not 15 million in additional cuts every year. It's the 15 million and then hold those cuts, which is roughly 4% of our budget. So if you take a look at this, if you look at the revenue surplus or deficit, and what that means is if it's a revenue surplus, like it is in 24 with $8.9 million in reserves, or excuse me, not in reserves, but in positive cash flow, we're spending less than we're bringing in. Then you move into 25 and we go into deficit spending by 16 million, and you can see all the way across. So and that's why below it, the ending cash balance with levies that have passed, and then what you end up seeing is significant declines in our cash reserves. So obviously $2 million, $2.2 million at the back end of 28 is on a $380 million, $385 million budget by then is not sufficient, but that's where we're at. But at least we were in the black all the way across.
Dr. Thompson, why is fiscal year 25, the revenue so much lower than the other years? There's $20 million in that year lower than in 24, and every other year it's lower than those years as well.
Because of when the new budget bill's staggering the money in from the state. So the 5-year forecast is modeled now with includes all those base assumptions, and it includes 1.7 mil PI levy, which cannot be used for PI as permanent improvements. So essentially, that's the money earmarked for construction, for upgrades of buildings, et cetera, et cetera. 7.2 million in general operating levy, and those two things combined will generate about $27 million a year. In the modeling, which is a good thing, the 5-year forecast is predicated on it being in fiscal year 25. If we pass in fiscal year 24, that's an additional $27 million in the general fund that is not forecasted. So if we're able to pass in 24, our 5-year forecast gets better. But if we don't pass in 24 but pass in 25, that's what the 5-year forecast is based on. So, sometimes people ask, what are you doing to be conservative? That's an example of being conservative, not assuming that we're going to pass it the very first time. I hope we do, and we'll do our very best to do that, but that is not what this is predicated on. And then this does not include construction of a new North High School. So you can see across the bottom, we really cut into our deficit spending, starting once the levy passes, but we're still in deficit spending, and we keep our cash reserves fairly high. Remember, our target is to be at least 60 million, and that number will climb each year, but have at least 2 months of cash reserves on hand. In this scenario, we do. When you do the same thing, but the only difference now is we've taken out an additional $85 million COPS. That's about $5.5 million a year in debt payments, but the PI levy is continuing, and the PI levy covers the debt payment, and that's about all. So what does that look like? Still manageable, but keep in mind that in 28, we're dipping below our 2 months of cash reserves, and not far off from 28, we would be levy imminent again. So, and that is, and keep in mind, that forecast that you're looking at right now is 15 million in cuts and does not include any additional expenditures. So even with, and what I think is important to note is even with the cuts and a levy passage, we still have to be very fiscally conservative, because you can see that in 28 we drop below that threshold of where we want to be.
But these numbers would also be different, though, even with that last statement, because you've indicated that we'll need an additional 600,000 in cuts. You said 15.6 might be the number now, right?
15.6 is probably the number to make these numbers real.
Okay. This
Just
includes
be-
15.6.
Yeah,
not
because there would probably need to be another 600,000 or so modeled in here of expenditures higher than what it's currently modeled.
15. Okay.
Excuse me, Dr. Thompson. Originally, when we talked about the 15 million deficit, and it was said that it wouldn't be like all over 1 year, like it would be phases that we would go through with the cuts.
No. It's always been predicated on next school year, 15 million in cuts.
I don't recall that as such. I remember saying that it wasn't going to just be like 15 million, which is fine. I mean,
Yeah.
I just remember the conversations. Am I the only one that recalls that? That it wasn't going to be just like an immediate cut, that it will be like
Yeah, I don't recall which one it was going to be on.
gradual cuts, like even starting from now, cutting throughout next year. Anyway, the only reason I bring this up because with additional expenditures coming that have been added so far from when we started from this 15 million, where are some areas that we're looking as far as to cut significant amounts at this point when we're talking about next school year, because we're basically here?
Yeah. So Dr. Robinson has scheduled some meetings where we're bringing everyone together, and I think he's wise to bring the whole team together and not make these decisions in isolation. So we have some meetings that are scheduled. We just had this conversation, I don't know, half hour ago, 45 minutes ago. So it's a constant discussion, but we'll bring everyone together. And one of the things that we have to take a hard look at is staffing levels have continued to increase pretty substantially while student enrollment continues to decline. So that started just before COVID. It stayed pretty mirrored as student population would decline, staffing was declining. And then right before COVID and into COVID, it went like this. And so that's kind of where we are. And, almost $7.5 million of positions were used with ESSER money. With the understanding, as I understand, I wasn't here, but the understanding is that, my understanding is that those positions were never meant to be permanent, but we carried them into this school year at least. So, had that not happened, then we would be $7 million and we would be okay in additional cuts and not the full 15 million. So I think that's important to keep in mind as well. Nobody's position is unnecessary. All these positions are to help our students at the end of the day, help our scholars. And so these are difficult decisions that have to be made, or we'll run ourselves into a situation where we can't afford to do the basics. And we do not want to put ourselves in that position.
I think my question is, why haven't the significant cuts already have started to be made?
Because how do I say this? The decision was made heading into this school year to make the cuts that were made, which there were some cuts made, but not significant cuts made. And that decision was made, and once kids' schedules are built and once the school year begins, it would be very, very difficult to go into a RIF, or a reduction in force as a RIF, while you're in the middle of a school year.
Yeah, especially if it's in-building staff.
Yeah.
If it's teaching
Yeah.
staff, I don't know. If it's central office staff, I don't know.
Yeah.
The school might still go.
There are some other areas to look
You
at.
need teachers in buildings.
Yeah,
Central
sure.
office can get a little lean. But I think the reason why I'm inquiring about that, and this is people's lives, right?
Yes,
These
sure
are
it
people's
is.
livelihood. And when we talk about the jobs that carried over that were ESSER funds, just because I remember having these talks, I just look to be informed by the treasurer on what's the best decisions to make. I know we've been in a lot with the buildings and things like that. But if things are rolling over that maybe should have been cut last year, just moving forward, I'm wondering, what is this about to look like when we get into next school year? When we talk about cuts and the word staffing is used, because I'm concerned because we're already short teacher staffs, and that's like a national thing that's happening, especially in urban education. So, I'm just wondering if I'm a person at home watching this, and we're talking about cuts, and we're talking about staff, and we're talking about serving the students, like, what really does that look like? And I know that's not an answer for right now, but I just want to be intentional in my understanding, even as I sit on this board, on what is this looking like? Because if you ask questions about positions and salaries, and now we're told, like, it's not good, it's not looking good. Because I feel like the last meeting, but it seems like I'm the only person here that is aware that the last meeting was like, we're in good, so if we go this, we're in pretty good shape if we get these cops, and now it's like, no, we're not.
Well, and I don't want to sound an alarm. These are the exact same slides that I used before. These are not altered slides. These are the exact same slides that you saw 2 months ago. We can handle things if we make $15 million in cuts. Now it's just a little bit more in cuts. So I'm just, sometimes IEPs require additional staff. There are reasons that, regardless of a budget, you have to break the budget, and that happens. But we have to be mindful that anything we add, whether it's a staff member, a software program, anything that is not budgeted for, and how it gets budgeted shortly we'll start budgeting for next school year. We look at historical data, so you're looking at the last 3 years of what a department spent, what they spent it on. They have an opportunity to say, hey, these are the things that we're going to need, and this is what we need to budget for moving into next year. Sometimes we trim it back, regardless of the asks, but what we're getting are, and it's not unusual, but what we are getting is some of those expenditures above and beyond what was budgeted. And there's been a lot of transition and a lot of new people, and so that is in part, and that is a good segue into something I really don't fully understand at this point, but I think it's important to share with you what I do know, and that is, so I found out today that basically we got a bill from the city for approximately $1.2 million a year for the next 5 years for payment on this building. So my understanding was that this building, that a TIF error by the city was found, and that is factual. TIF is a tax increment funding. So it's a TIF is when a business might move into the community and the city government strikes a deal with them to reduce their taxes or eliminate their taxes for X number of years and for them to move and locate into Akron. So it's a way to entice business growth and economic development in the city. Happens everywhere, not just Akron, everywhere. So there was an error discovered. My understanding was that error was enough money to pay for this building. But that, according to what the city sent us today, is not true. I contacted the previous treasurer, and he believes the city is accurate. So we are reviewing the numbers to make sure that they are accurate. We have a few options in terms of how we might finance that debt, but as it stands right now, what is not forecasted is roughly $1.2 million a year in bond payments back to the city, up to about $6 million to pay for this building.
And so this is why I keep asking the question, because although the slides are the same, the conversation is not.
Yeah, that part is true.
Because the conversation is not matching with what my eyes are seeing. So then if I try to recall, and this is why I'm speaking, because before, I've seen this, and it was $15 million, and then in a conversation, it said, okay, now we're looking at another $600,000. Now we're talking about millions if we include this bill that came from the city. So we're talking about a whole nother situation here as far as debt. What we're paying, it's like we're going in more and more debt. And so for me, that's concerning. I know things sometimes are what they are. And so I want to be more proactive than reactive. Before we get to that end, which we know can happen very quickly, the numbers decline. So that's the only reason I'm trying to wrap my head around clarity on an action plan. Now we have this amount. So it's like we have to rethink is what in my mind, but I'm looking for you for guidance, that these numbers and what's been projected has to be rethought because the debt now is increased.
That's correct.
Okay, so.
Yeah, you're spot on. Unfortunately, I was not aware, and I don't think I had any way to be aware. That was a deal struck in maybe 2018. Certainly Dr. Robinson found out from me today. He had no way of knowing. And to some degree, those are the cards that were dealt. And so what I will do is I'm going to remodel everything and bring another forecast back that I think will be more reflective and more accurate. But we have been incredibly proactive, I think, because a lot of places wouldn't have made those cuts as soon as that we're proposing to make them. As difficult as they are, it's better to do it now on this end and stretch our levy out than it is to wait until the very end and have, a massive problem that we can't get our way out of. So we're trying to be as proactive as we can. If we are, again, one of the things that, so paramount, even more so now, most of these problems are mitigated considerably if we pass a levy in '24. So that's $27 million more in this 5-year forecast that we are not showing. So we really need to pass that levy in 2024.
But I thought when you say that, I remember us having that discussion about levy being in 24 or 25. Am I incorrect to remember that there was something about a half payment?
That's right.
In the first year, not a full?
Yeah, right. So whenever a levy passes, whether it's May or November, it doesn't matter. So let's say anything passes in 24. We get a half collection in 25, full collection in 26. So it starts the levy cycle the next year. So if we don't, what I've modeled is not passing until 25, which means we get a half collection in 26 and a full collection in 27. So that's what's modeled here. Okay. That's what's modeled here. But if we were to pass in 24, You bring in an extra, and you've just backed everything up by a year.
Fiscal year.
Fiscal years. Yeah, we're talking fiscal.
Maybe it would help to see those.
That's a calendar year on a levy.
Yeah.
And this is a
Fiscal year.
fiscal year on a,
Maybe it would help to see all of that in one section, I guess. I mean, even with the new cuts you're saying we have to make now, plus the additional TIF payments we have
Yes.
to make to the city, which is brand new to all of us at this
Yeah.
point. We need to see those numbers on here.
Yes, we do.
I want to be accurate about what numbers we're really talking about.
100%. And so I'm going to bring that. I just didn't have, by the time I found out about it mid-afternoon,
Yeah, yeah.
I didn't have a chance to accurately feel good about modeling this, because I want to model it and I want to run it by other people as well, get other eyes on it besides my own. But I'll bring an updated 5-year forecast that reflects what I think current expenditures are, and adding in that payment to the city for this building. But I am going to try to explore ways we could at least have options on the table. So for example, perhaps, maybe, I don't know this, but perhaps the city would be willing to let us refinance those dollars. It's in their name. The building's in our name, the debt's in theirs. But there's a contractual agreement that drives this. So if they'll refinance it, let's say from take the 5 years and stretch it out to 10 or 12 years, and we agree to pay the additional interest, so the city's held harmless, then that would drive our payments down considerably. So that might be something we need to explore. So we're going to look into those possibilities. It's going to take some time to put all this together.
Yeah, and I don't want to cause a rift with the city. I mean, none of us do. But in reality, the error was theirs.
That's my question.
Yeah, I mean, you said it was an error. Whose error was it?
The agreement essentially says that we owe you X number of dollars. The city of Akron owes the school district X number of dollars because of an error in TIF money that was supposed to come to the district that didn't.
Okay.
So it was caught, and at the time, this building was for sale.
Mm-hmm.
So the deal, as I understand it, was worked that the city would take out the loan for this building
In their name.
in their name, but the building in our name. They're holding the loan,
Sure.
we're the owner, and then they would make the payments until the TIF was reimbursed, which I understood it to be the whole building, as I had heard it when I got here, but it's not. There's an extra $6 million, according to what we received today, on this side, that is our responsibility over the next 5 years.
And so some person found that out recently and submitted a bill to us today.
Essentially, yeah. I don't know exactly when they created it in the city, but today's when I was informed by our controller that we have a financial liability.
That still seems odd, like we don't,
Yeah.
shouldn't we have been getting a bill?
It seems very odd. I
No,
mean,
the city has paid it, and so when I called the previous treasurer, he would have expected it, but somehow it got lost in the shuffle because we're working with them to help us model our 5-year forecast, and it wasn't, it was something from 2018, and it just slipped through the cracks.
are you saying we should have known about this then before now?
Well, we did. The previous administration did.
Okay.
The current administration did not. So there was a failure of communication between transitions of people.
So we knew we should have been paying this for the last 5 years.
We weren't supposed to be paying it.
Okay, that's what I'm asking, yeah.
Next year is our first payment.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
We knew it was coming due next year.
Yes.
But that wasn't discussed, communicated
That wasn't
in the transition.
communicated, right.
I've never heard about it in finance
Yeah,
committee
same here.
in all these years.
I've never heard about this.
I can tell you that we're running it down through our Retzel attorney by the name of Markey, drafted that contract, and David Seed, who represents us on the TIF side, and he's pretty much a TIF expert, a tax expert. So those two are running it down to ensure that everything is as it should be. But what I know now, I'm sharing.
Yeah. It just seems like we're going to be penalized, or our students are going to be penalized for something that we didn't cause, I guess. You know, we didn't make this error appear. And now we have
I
to
think
make
the
additional
real
cuts
problem is
potentially.
it's not an error. My fear is that it's not an error. It's accurate, it's contractual, and it just wasn't, you know, was buried in a file from 2018, and now we're in 2023 going into 2024, and the people that orchestrated that deal are gone.
Are gone, yeah.
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 And it just didn't get communicated.
I'd
That,
definitely
hey,
like to
you
do
got a
more-
bill coming in 2024, get ready.
I'd
you know.
definitely like to have more digging done, figure out
Yep.
what our options are, number one, whether
We
there's any
are.
kind of defense we have to it, or any kind of way to not have to do that and penalize ourselves and change our numbers. And
Yeah.
it's a pretty big amount. So
It's a big amount. It's $6 million as it stands right now that we would have to minus off the back end of that 5-year forecast. So quick math tells you that $2 million now becomes minus $4 million. I mean, rough, of course, but generally that's what it says. So it's unfortunate. I don't think anybody, the city or anyone here, was trying to do anything nefarious. I think it just, communication got dropped. And, you know, when I came here, my understanding was this building was just basically a trade for that TIF money. But that doesn't appear to be the case.
Question. I know this is our 5-year forecast, so you said 1.2 million a year for the next 5 years, but if this were a longer forecast, is that 1.2 million in perpetuity, or is it 6 million and then it's done?
It's 5 payments of $1.2 million roughly, 1.2 and change. 5 payments, 1 a year for the next 5 years, and then it's paid for. So it stops at 6 million. Good question. So again, we'll review it. I'll bring it back to the board, back to this committee when I know more and when I know what our financing options are. As soon as I find those out, I'll obviously discuss those with Dr. Robinson, and we'll do the best we can to strategize moving forward.
Yeah, I just wanted to share this. At Capitol Conference recently, I can't remember which workshop I was in, but it was something that probably would have helped us in this situation that board should probably have, is a document of such that tells us when certain things become due. Some of the examples that they gave were like warranties, for example, or when certain repairs are due, maintenance things are due, but this would have been something that would have been on this chart so that we wouldn't be caught off guard like this. So,
yeah.
right, so, because I don't know what else is out there now that we're not aware of, but if there's things like that are time sensitive, you know, big ticket items or, you know, things that come due, we definitely need like on that calendar, that's part of our normal agenda, finance.
A constantly changing calendar. We can always add and, you know, subtract stuff if we need to. Something along those lines, yeah.
All right.
So,
Oh, Superintendent.
so one of the things that I asked about when I got here.
Superintendent, you might go to the mic over here, please.
So one of the things that I asked about when I got here was, do we have refresh plans for our busing and just those things that would be coming on cycle? Different names, but same thing. So we do have that, but before I got here, before Dr. Thompson got here, some of that stuff was taken off cycle. And so we're now in a situation where, like for buses, buses were not purchased on the cycle. And so this happened a couple of years ago. So now we're in a situation where we're trying to get them back on cycle. And that's just one example. And this came up just this week, actually. Today is Monday, I'm sorry. It came up on Friday. So it's just one example of a few things that were taken off cycle. So now we're trying to figure out how to get these things back on cycle. And those things like the buses, certain vehicles that we need for transportation purposes of transporting things, that's all going to impact this 5-year forecast. But we're just like finding this stuff out. Every day is a new day of discovery of things that we're just finding out. And actually just found out this information about the building right before this meeting.
And this is why I keep
Like 2 seconds before this meeting. So
the accountability part, because it's not, Dr. Thompson as well as yourself, and us, we're inheriting this, right? So it's really, even though you sit in the role of treasurer and superintendent, this is not anything, now you have to deal with the storm that you didn't call.
But I think now, as we move forward, getting through the blueprint, which is a strategic plan, getting through through the budget process, looking at our master facilities plan, and looking at our refresh plans for technology, equipment, all of these things, we're now going to be able to have documents with these, or at least a means of being able to have accountability for these things. So we literally could tell you as a board, every 5 years or every 10 years or every whatever that cycle was, trying to get some of this stuff back on cycle as best we can, as quickly as we can, and then so that you would know, for example, and this is just an example, right? So this is 2023. So in 2028, for example, if we purchase, for example, 10 buses this year, and if there's on a 4-year cycle, so in 2028, you would know, okay, it's time for us to purchase the next set of buses and the next way, and I'm just using buses in that time frame as an example. That's nothing concrete, but you would have that.
So we can project on what our budget is
so
going
we
to be
would
spending
know
on capital equipment,
right,
such as buses.
right. So
And we do budget for that.
Yeah. So as the 5-year forecast is done, all of this stuff we would know, like where we would be and whether or not we're going to be in deficit or not. The other piece is that the 5-year forecast is one thing, but the other piece is being able to sustain the stuff that we're currently doing, and whether it's programs or programs, meaning programs in buildings and just different things that we've done. So we're going to be meeting as soon as we return back from the holiday, kind of a lock-in to just kind of look at all of this budgetary stuff, and now this piece that we did not know about until this today. All of those things will intersect in terms of what we're trying to do, but it's going to be important as we move forward. And what I said to people today, nothing is off the table. And everything is on the table when it comes to what we're looking at in terms of cuts and where those cuts are going to happen. We're looking at the entire district without losing the integrity of programming, without losing the integrity of the work that has to be done. We've got to look at, positions, things that were agreed upon, are done prior to me getting here, prior to us getting here. It's going to be important for some of that stuff too, because some of it was taken apparently off of general fund, put in ESSER, and now it has to go back to the general fund. And so, and then there were other decisions that, that were made, unfortunately. And Dr. Thompson and I just had a meeting right before this meeting, just kind of talking about some of those decisions that were made that he wasn't here for, neither was I, but the decisions have been made. And so now we have to now live with it and figure out how do we continue and keep our school district moving forward, with all these different moving pieces of decisions that were made prior to us getting here. But we still got to move forward. And whether it was made last year or 2 days before I started, I own it now. So I have to figure out, working with them, on how we can move forward so that we're able to keep things moving. But this is going to be a conversation, which is a really great conversation now, but it's going to be a conversation that we're going to have in terms of, buildings, programs, schools, who has what, and what we can afford to do and what we can't afford to do. We still have some other things that we have to make some decisions on right now relative to some of the programmatic concerns that we, things that we have to do. So all of these pieces are pieces that will impact all of this.
Amen. Thank you, Superintendent. And Dr. Thompson, and I think when we come back together to talk about these pieces, I want it to be very clear and plain. Like with this areas where we're looking to cut these departments, these programs, like very clear.
That's what we're doing next week.
Yeah, because like when because like as you're talking now, I understand it's just like subjective, like decisions made and this, that. I don't know what that means. Like I want to know what that means. If you're talking about a job, I want to know what the job is. If you're talking about a program. But I do recall when we came, when I first came, I guess I should say, Job and I, the ESSER funds. And it was a lot of discussion around ESSER funds and because of the sustainability of what ESSER funds were funding. And so this is not like a new conversation. I think what's interesting is how, if I'm understanding you, that those things that were funded by ESSER funds that originally were not in our budget to be funded through general funds now have been taken up into general funds.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, causing.
You're understanding that correctly.
Okay, causing a further deficit. When the discussions were had, that had been on people's radar. What happens when the ESSER funds run out? These jobs, certain, supplemental things, and some even the programming. Because I was one that says, interventions, even for a short period of time, if they're consistent, can still be beneficial to kids with a expiration date. Like we're doing interventions for this grade for these years until these funds run out. And then in the meantime, my understanding was that other things, but I know administrations and things change, that there was going to be research about other maybe partnerships, grant funding, and things that could sustain those. Not then it just automatically was being, consumed within our general budget. And that's not even all of it yet, because some things are still, ESSER funds are still being used, but when that comes, then it's going to be additional, X amount of dollars then that we're going to look at to put. So these are like the things that I'm just processing out loud, Steve, because I don't expect you to have the answer right now. I feel bad that this is just with everything else that's going on that you've had to muddle through when we're talking about these buildings, that now it's yet this thing. That anyway, which leads me to the audit question, departmental audits and programming, because when I think about how to live lean, are we doing, and has this already been done, and I apologize if it's been shared, but not departmental audits, program audits, facilities, capital equipment audit, like what are we buying? What are we budgeted to buy? Do we need to buy? What programs, because we spend millions on software and curriculum, are actually being utilized? Are they effective? Dr. Hall talks about this often, like, are these programs effective? And this is when I get back to what are teachers saying in buildings about certain trainings or in-service or curriculum or things that we may have in buildings that we're spending all this money on but are not maximizing our effectiveness for what we're trying to do. What does such audits look like in those areas?
Well, that's a great, absolutely spot on, Ms. Jackson. And for example, right now the technology department is doing exactly what you just said, looking at where do we have duplicate programs that, you know, might be called different names and purchased from different vendors but do the same thing. So we're working our way through that, and that needs to be categorically across the board. And we'll have, because any way that we, you know, we will circle the wagons around student programming. So what we'll do our very best to do is through attrition, through declining student enrollment, but declining student enrollment also means reduced state funding with that.
And it should be reduced staffing.
And it has to mirror fairly closely, and it just has gotten away from the district for the last 4 or 5 years, and that's created the situation in part. I mean, there's a lot of pieces. There's a ton of variables that and again, I don't want to over-dramatize or freak our staff out or anything else. It could be a lot, our financial situation could be a lot worse, and it's still better than a lot of the other urbans, which I modeled for you before. But Columbus just passed a levy, for example, which I'm sure dramatically makes a difference for them. But this is not uncommon. You could pull 5-year forecasts, and many school districts are falling off what they're calling the Esser cliff and struggling with, you had this infusion of cash. If you weren't incredibly disciplined in how you spent it, you could create legacy expenditures, and then those are biting school districts. And the problem is if you implement a program and it's effective and it helps students, it's hard to take away. And so, you know, those are all the things that we'll have to review. But Ms. Jackson, I agree that there are many other pathways besides just staffing. This is a large organization, but 80% of our costs are people. You know, we're in a service industry. We don't make widgets. You know, we don't buy raw materials. So other ways that a company might cut expenditures is impossible for us. And I want to be respectful of the next group that follows us. We're not going to be able to get through everything I'd hoped to get through. I'll just add it to
Our next meeting.
I'll add it to the next meeting, whatever we don't get through. But I do want to just bring to your attention House Bill 187. Follow it. And basically it seems harmless on its surface, but you know, we saw that huge jump in property taxes. So this bill would basically say we're going to take 3 years of property taxes and average that out. Well, I guess in some years that could be beneficial to us. It just so happens that if they do that this time around, it would not be beneficial to us because we had that huge jump, which gave us a spike in projected revenue. But if they change it and do a 3-year average, that spike's going to come down. So just something to follow. I don't know. I'll save this for our board meeting, our October financial reports. As I said to you before, they're all uploaded there for you. They really, especially that first page, really gives you a great overview of kind of where we stand financially. From month to month. It fluctuates in the beginning of the year because of when we get tax receipts, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm going to feel a little bit better when we get Novembers of knowing, because we've had, you know, $1 million swings going both ways just because of when revenue comes in and when expenditures come in. But we'll have a better view of where we stand in November, but you can see October's are in there. And again, that first page will really highlight where we stand on cash reserves, et cetera, et cetera. I can tell you that one thing that is absolutely working for us is the market remains hot and our investments are pulling down more money than was forecasted. So we don't just let our money sit. We invest it. We use a company called Red Tree, helps us do those investments. Valerie's on it. Sue is on it. I can't tell you how outstanding the treasurer's staff is, sincerely. They are crackerjacks, and they are on this stuff consistently and really monitoring and watching it, and we're running those reports every month, and those are the reports that we give to you. So just some real basic levy strategy. Done a lot of levies in the past. I guess a previous district where we had 6 renewal levies forced us to be on the ballot a lot. So I got a lot of experience being on the ballot. Doesn't mean I'm a subject matter expert, but over the years I've had the opportunity to fail and pass, and what are some of the differences. And obviously we are levy eminent. I know that Dr. Robinson has had some discussions with me already. He has some great plans in place to get this moving, and we're at the point now where we have to move. About a year is a reasonable amount of time, and that's essentially where we're at. We're just, actually even slightly under a year at this point, if you can believe that. But have you ever heard of Samuel Pierpont Langley? You ever heard that name? No. Most of you have never heard of that name. I would have never heard that name. In the early 1900s, when they were trying to invent flight, this guy was considered one of the premier engineers in the entire country. He was funded with, at that time, lavishly funded, supported by all the best educated people that would know about flight and aeronautics, et cetera, at the time. But Samuel Pierpont Langley failed consistently, and his people quit. So then you've heard of the Wright brothers, right? No funding, no formal education, no anything, and they invent flight. So how is one group that's so well organized, so well funded, and so highly educated not successful, and another group is, that doesn't have near the resources of the first group? I think it's really important that this drives, and I've heard Dr. Robinson talk about it related to other issues, but we're really good at knowing what we do. We're really good at knowing how we do it, but we're not always so good in letting people know why we do what we do. And what the community needs to, we need to be able to effectively communicate and clearly define for them is, why are we on the ballot is a pivotal key piece of what we must effectively communicate. People don't buy what you say, they buy what they believe. People have beliefs. There's a lot of beliefs about a lot of things that are out there. Saying it doesn't necessarily move me, but what I believe, and what I believe is very much driven by why something is happening and why I'm doing what I'm doing. This is I hope you've not seen this video. It's excellent.
This is called How Do I Know? And a lot of times when people hear the phrase, how do I know, the next thing they say is what? How do I know what? But the key really isn't to know what, the key is to know why. Because when you know your why, you have options on what your what can be. For instance, my why is to inspire people to walk in purpose. My what is stand-up comedy. My what is writing books. My what can be going out with some friends to eat. In fact, another what that has moved me towards my why is a web series that we have out now called Break Time. So every Wednesday at 3 o'clock, you should subscribe to the channel. We do a series called Break Time on YouTube. So 3 o'clock, we drop a new episode. One episode in particular, I'm about to show you a clip to. We were in Winston-Salem. So Break Time, this is how it works. I travel the country, I do stand-up comedy, probably an hour and a half at an event. And in the middle of my show, I'll just sit down and start talking to the audience. And funny just happens. Or I'll meet somebody who's really interesting. So I met this one guy, and he said that he teaches music at a school. I was like, all right, you teach music, you know, can you sing? And I'm just gonna show you the clip. Check it. So you're a musical director. Cool.
Yes, sir.
All right, so let me get a couple bars of like Amazing Grace. Can you do the first part of that? Go ahead.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me.
Wow. That bro could sing, you know what I'm saying? All right. Now, what you give me the version is if your uncle just got out of jail, you got shot in the back when you was a kid. I'm just saying, let me see the hood version real quick if you know which version I'm talking about. Just see if that exists. Let me see what you got.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. Right now I'm found, was blind, but now I see.
So here's the thing. The first time I asked him to sing, he knew what he was doing. The second time I asked him to sing, he knew why he was doing it. When you know your why, your what has more impact because you're walking in or towards your purpose.
Yeah, I was Googling Dr. Robinson singing at church, and I couldn't find it, but I found the thing that I've heard he sounds just like this guy. So I played it. But it's really illustrates or narrates a really important point that we do when we're focused on the why, and the why is meaningful, that provides that purpose and
This is called How Do I Know?
That we need. So when we're building that campaign strategy, we have to know the why. Why are we on the ballot? What does it mean? And how does it impact our kids? So that when I go to the ballot and I'm voting no, if I vote no or I vote yes, I know why, and I know what the impact is. And then just simple basic strategy that we have to begin to work on sooner than later. Winning an election is not convincing 51% of the people to vote yes. Winning an election is convincing 51% of the people that vote to vote yes. And there'll be a fairly high voter turnout in that November. I think that benefits us. It works to our favor. But what we have to find is seek out our yes voters, bank them, and get them to the polls. That's what we have to do in order to win. We know statistically if 60% of our parents vote, 60% of our parents vote, we win. Over many states, many elections, 60% of your parents turn out, you will win. So we know we've got to find those yes voters and get them to the polls. And we know a parent of a kindergartner is far more likely to vote yes than a parent of a senior in high school, who's far more likely to vote yes than someone like me. You know, some old guy whose kids are grown and gone and out of the system. So we know demographically who to target. We'll know what precincts are our yes precincts and which ones are our no's. And our job is to churn out 51% yes, at least. Again, I'll go quickly because I know the next group is ready to go, but those ratings, again, you know, you have the investment grade, and you obviously you want to be investment grade. You want to be in at least one of those categories of investment grades. You already know that we're an A, and we could have been an A plus, but because it was a COPS issuance, they downgraded us slightly, because a COPS issuance is not the same as a bond issue voted on by the public and selling bonds that were already backed up by definite tax collections. A COPS is not backed up by any definitive tax collection or singular tax collection. So we ended up at the A, the strong capacity to meet financial commitments, but somewhat susceptible to adverse economic conditions and changes in circumstances. That's probably fairly fair. Then you see the speculative grades, and there are lots of them, and there are school districts in the state of Ohio that are in the speculative grade, and what that would mean for us is, A, we may not even be able to sell all the bonds, and if you did, they would be at a much higher interest rate than what we had to pay in order to sell all of our bonds. So those bondholders, for the higher the rating, the lower the risk, the lower the return. You know, that's just basic investment strategy. And of course, our rating was the A, which there's a lot of reasons, and I won't read them all to you. You've seen them, but you know, maintaining a strong general fund reserve is important. That's one of the things. These are their notes. This is S&P's notes, not mine. They liked the fact, and Dr. Robinson and I were there along with Todd Adkins presenting. They really gravitated towards the fact that we saw a problem and we were taking decisive action to mitigate that problem, and that is our reductions. So to your point, Ms. Jackson, that's exactly what they helped us on our credit rating to some degree. Right-sizing our facilities. We're closing facilities. Dr. James closed facilities. I don't know about previous superintendents to that, but the district has been right-sizing as it's lost enrollment, and the city of Akron has lost population, considerable population. I think you're all aware of that. We have no debt burden. We do now with that last COPS issuance, but it's still a really low threshold on what we could be in debt. The debt issuance is 1% of the general fund. So I want to dispel any myth that says building this building is crushing us financially. That is not true. It's not a true statement. It's 1% of our budget. Again, it's debt. It's debt issuance. I don't minimize that, but it is not the cause of any need to reduce the $15 million. We would still need to reduce at least $14 million a year if we weren't building a building. So it's fairly inconsequential. And then the management, they looked at management and operations, how for years we've been, up until recently, dealing with declining student enrollment. We need to get back to that. And part of that is, unfortunately, as you lose students, that should be reflected in your staffing levels. Then, unfortunately, not only has it not been reflected, it's been increased. And that was in part because of ESSER money, and this push to, and we went through we've had so much learning loss over those couple of years, and those of you that are in education, or all of you see education or your own children, you know how some students thrived in that environment, but most did not, and most fell behind. And that's what the ESSER dollars were for. And then one of the great things about our city is the large employers are pretty diverse and been pretty stable, generally speaking. So that helps us as well. So I did get through it all, so we don't have to push anything out. Sorry I had to go, I was going to do a little more in-depth on the monthly reports, but I'll pick that up at our board meeting. Any questions for me?
Yeah, I think I've asked mine as we went, so.
Well, good. I'm glad you did.
Thank you, Dr. Thompson, for that presentation. Looking forward to just getting more information moving forward. And I just wanted to bring to everybody's attention as well, we do have that fiscal calendar that's part of our agenda for this committee. And so moving forward, if we can enhance it to maybe include those things, such as the information that we found out about today and other things that, needs to be to our attention. So just wanted to share that. And if there's no other questions, comments, or concerns, we'll adjourn the meeting at this time.
And if there's any additional information that you want, that you don't feel like that I'm providing here, if you just give me some feedback, or if you have suggestions or topics that you want covered, please let me know. You sent me a list, and I've been feeding off that, but if there's anything else that would come up.
One thing that's coming to mind when I think about us in comparison to similar sized districts, I'm just interested, because there was no manual during COVID, right? Everyone just did the best that they could with what they had. There was nothing that we could really refer to. I'm interested in maybe how other districts of similar size did things that maybe we could have learned from. I'm just interested in that because,
Yeah,
again,
there were really two camps that sort of came out, and superintendents at that time were very divided about what way should you go and what way shouldn't you go. And I'm not suggesting that I know what was the right way and what was the wrong way. At that point, I was still a superintendent, and my choice was to move as much of that money into infusion in the general fund as possible, i.e. lots of supplanting, and then what ESSER money we did use to be in compliance with the state and the federal government were used for one-time expenditures. That, again, supplanted in a backdoor sort of way the 5-year forecast. Like, you buy all your computers with ESSER money, you buy all your safety stuff with ESSER money, because they're one-time expenditures. And I did not hire any people with ESSER money. If we needed additional people, I used general fund. The other philosophy was to pour this directly into students, not necessarily the financial picture, and hire whatever you need in order to try and close that gap and use ESSER money for that. So, I mean, there's merit to both of those arguments. One stabilizes your finances more than another. But I think the biggest problem that we've hit is creation of these positions, stress on the general fund, and bringing it back to the general fund. But your only other option at that point would have been to reduce all those positions, and that decision was not made. So, and we really beefed up summer school. The work program that we have, that's about $400,000 a year that we're paying. We still have another summer or two left in that contract too. So there's, expenditures for that were designed to be out of ESSER money that will now be out of general fund. So those things all stressed out the financial outlook of the district.
Thank you for that. Okay. That's all for now.
Okay. Thank you.
You guys.
Mhm.